Hi and welcome to the fourth of my Kungsleden map follow along videos. This will cover the route going from Jakkvik to Ammarnäs. The map that I'm using here is 1 to 100,000, so each grid square is 2 kilometers. Setting out from Jakkvik, the path climbs up through some forest onto an open fell. Just before you leave the tree line, there's a little emergency shelter here. But you don't really need it because you're so close to Jakkvik. Then you're onto the open fell for a bit, crossing over into the next valley until you head back down into the trees, and shortly you come across this hut here. I can't pronounce that, but this hut here. It's unmanned, but it's unlocked. I think there's a key you can pick up in Jakkvik to go into in a room which has beds in. I only stopped here to have a little snack and break. So continuing onwards, you head down a little bit and then through this area of birch forest until eventually you arrive at, there's a bridge here at the outlet of this lake. It has some flat spots for camping, I think a couple of benches and things. So crossing the bridge you enter a little bit of denser birch forest and go again over another sort of small hill and then descend down into the next valley. Here you link up with a kind of gravel road which leads down into Adolfström. Adolfström is a small village. It has this cute little cafe and shopping called the Hanselbod, run by a really lovely lady. And although it's not very big, it seems to be like packed with things, bringing out a constant stream of freshly baked pastries, which were all eaten. And most importantly here, you can get the key for the Rävfallsstugan hut, which is a couple of days away. So you need to pay for it, and you're given an envelope to post it back to her once you reach Ammarnäs. If she has it available, I'd definitely recommend getting it if you can, because it lets you unlock the wood-fired sauna at Rävfallsstugan, which is really, really nice. You can pay to camp here, and I think they have a service hut which you can use, and maybe some kind of hostel type beds. I didn't do this. I kept on going, so I headed out of Adolfström along the side of the lake, and then the path sort of heads off the lake, and there's this little wind shelter here. And this is where having a map comes in really helpful, because none of the apps will show this, but there's this wind shelter here, which there's some marks on the trees and a little path through the wood, and it looks like you might not be going anywhere, but you come across this lovely little shelter. It's right by the edge of the lake, it has a latrine, and the shelter had a fire pit as well and some well-stocked wood. So I set my sleeping mat up inside the shelter and made myself a little fire in the evening. So it was a good place to stay. Then the next day I left the shelter and got back onto the Kungsleden. It goes through this little nature reserve and heads to Vuoruojuhka, which is a sort of tiny little settlement. There's a hostel-y type place here, but it was closed for the season, so I don't know what it's like. But I think maybe during the summer you can camp there and maybe stay in beds. You follow the rivers here, cross over them a little bit. There are some bridges. There's a bigger bridge here, and then on the other side of the bridge there's an emergency shelter, which is the nicest one that I've seen. It's like more like a mountain hut, but it's just a emergency shelter. Then there's a kind of slightly steep ascent here out of the forest, and you're up onto some open fell again. Really nice views southwards to the mountains beyond. You turn off Winter Trail and head directly south here. This is all sort of like birch forest and little lakes and things. It's okay going. Eventually you pass by this emergency shelter here. I didn't go and see what it was like because the path doesn't actually go by it, but I think some people maybe camp nearby. You keep on heading south by these lakes here until you reach, there's a little bridge here. This is another kind of sketchy bridge on the Kungsleden. It was rusty and kind of leaning a little bit, so it felt a bit dodgy going over. On the other side of the bridge there are some flat spots to camp. I camped here, and there were also a couple of other people who were staying there as well. Really nice views, but very exposed. Kungsleden continues up the valley here, beneath these kind of cliffs, following a moraine ridge, and then goes up onto the moraine ridge here and starts to divert onto the nearby hill. You come to this point here, which is it's the boundary between like two administrative regions in Sweden. And what you'll notice here is that the quality of the bridges and the boardwalks improves quite a lot from here, because they spend more of their budget on maintaining the trail here. Also, the paint markers change from the red to orange. The route heading across the fell here is nice and flat. It's easy going. You turn off the winter trail. The winter trail heads south here, and you turn off it down here. You go past this. Here there's an amazing wooden suspension bridge, one of these kind of newer ones, which is really nice. And you go over the edge of this hill here. There's some more bridges here, and then you enter back. Some nice camp spots here, because there's really good views all the way down the valley to Ammarnäs there. But you descend into the valley through some forest. It's quite steep, but soon it levels out once you meet this track heading up to Rävfallsstugan. This bit here seemed to go on forever. For some reason, I kept on thinking that I'd be at Rävfalls, and then it was just a bit further on. It was also really muddy as well. So it's a really great hut. It's unmanned. It has a main hut with a kitchen and some bunk rooms in. The kitchen is unlocked, so you can just use it, but you need the key to get into the rooms. The key also opens up the sauna down by the river as well, and there's a woodshed where you can chop wood for the sauna. So according to my guidebook, this section from Rävfalls to Ammarnäs is supposed to take 7 hours. I set off quite early in the morning because it was a Saturday, and the only shop in Ammarnäs has quite funny hours and closes at about 3 p.m. So I ended up setting off just before 8 to try and make it for when the shop was open. The route out from the hut crosses over the river and then climbs up out of the valley along here. It's not super steep, and once you reach the tree line, it levels out nicely. And then you slowly go along this ridge line here and sort of follow this for the rest of the day down to Ammarnäs. It's quite exposed up there. It was raining when I left the hut, but it sort of stopped once I got to the open fell and started heading southwards. This section here was very windy and exposed for me, but you head along the top of here and reach, there's a cairn there which marks the summit of this sort of hill. Heading onwards, you go down a little bit and along to this emergency hut here, which is a good place to stop and have a little rest if you need it. It was windy, but it became quite a nice day by this point. So it was sunny but cold. Essentially, you're just heading along the tops of these hills, and here by this lake, you turn off down into a bit of sparse birch forest and head towards Ammarnäs. There were some nice spots to camp here, especially sort of round here, and there's a wind shelter by this lake here, which would make a good place to camp. This final section down into Ammarnäs is actually I found it quite slippery and rocky, so it wasn't as easy as I'd hoped it to be. Ammarnäs itself is quite a big settlement, so you actually have to do a fair amount of walking before you get to the part of Ammarnäs where all the amenities and things are. You come off the Kungsleden here and meet up with a road, and then head round the back here where you come to the good stuff, which is the shop and the various hostels and hotels there. I arrived here shortly after 1, so it definitely didn't take the 7 hours that my guidebook said it would. I walked fairly quickly, but if the weather was bad, maybe it would take you 7 hours, but I think it was a bit of an overestimation. I first stopped by the supermarket where I bought loads of food. I had a little bench outside where I sat and was soon joined by some friends I'd met, and we'd stayed at Rävfalls the previous night, and we had a bit of a hiker-hunger moment where we sat outside just eating loads of junk food. There's a couple of places to stay in Ammarnäs. There's the Ammarnäs Garden Hotel, which is here. You can get a room there, or you can ask to camp in the garden, and you can use their showers and saunas and all of that kind of stuff. They also do a buffet breakfast, which is really good. It has waffles. There's a little nature museum there in the same building, and when we turned up that afternoon, it was their 50th birthday party, and they gave us loads of coffee and cake, which was really nice. I think there's also another STF affiliated hostel type place a bit further back in this part of town, and just along the kind of main road there's also a bar and cafe which does burgers and things and beer. Anyway, this concludes this section of the Kungsleden. The next video will cover the final section going from Ammarnäs to Hemavan. I hope you've enjoyed this, and thank you for watching.